Hello, and welcome to Hanging Out with Nolan Hong. I'm your host, Nolan Hong, and big thank you to each and every one of you for your support. Last week, we launched the podcast, and within the first 48 hours, we had over 200 followers on Facebook, over 150 downloads, and that just exceeded our expectations. We had no idea what to expect, but we did not expect that many people following and downloading, and the reviews and the feedback have been just amazing. So thank you so much for making me and Jamie's dreams come true here. Joining me, of course, is my super producer extraordinaire, Jamie, and my co-host, the Doctor of Snugglenomics, Dr. Emmett Bean, and we are broadcasting out of the Pop Creative Media Studios here in Honolulu, Hawaii, and today, we have a really, really fascinating guest. It's my friend Lopaka. He is a ghost storytelling phenomenon here in Hawaii. If you know anything about ghost storytelling, he is involved with it. He has ghost story tours all over the island, and he's going to be sharing with us some amazing, amazing stories. I'm going to try to keep Jamie here in the studio because she's already warned me that she's already scared and she might just run out in the middle of this podcast. But don't worry, Jamie. He's very good at what he does. And there should be no ghosts here in the studio. Not that we know of. But before we begin our show, let's go ahead and pour out a wonderful brew of Monster Energy Drink. Thank you so much to Monster Energy Drink for sponsoring the show. Got my Ultra Sunrise, and I am ready to go. So without further ado, let's get to it. Here's Lopaka. Well, we're here with Lopaka, and we're going to be talking a lot about what you're doing now, which, I mean, a lot of people know you for, you know, the ghost stories and all that stuff. But we actually know each other through the amazing world of professional wrestling here.
Professional wrestling.
Lopaka was my co-host on Action Zone Wrestling, but also he's my boss, and he has the distinction of being the only person to ever fire me from a job. So I guess thanks.
No problem. Yeah, that was a fun time. You know, I wanted to come back in some capacity with AZW, but I know at that point I didn't have time to wrestle. You know, there are other things that were happening in my life that, you know, as you can see now, take precedence. If there was ever an opportunity where I could get back in shape, I'd probably make my last return match with Daryl Bonilla.
Wow. Yeah. DDB versus Lopaka. Wow. Yeah. So I know we want to get into the stuff you're doing now, but real quickly, because it's so interesting to me, and I don't think I ever asked you this. It's weird because when I'm involved in the pro wrestling things, I guess I'm so nervous and respectful. I've been a fan since I was 5. Like, I don't want to ask anybody any questions. We worked together for so long, and I never asked you this. Like, how did you get involved to begin with in professional wrestling?
This is way back in the early 80s. My ex-wife, my ex-brother-in-law, we were watching pro wrestling from Dallas, Texas on TV. Oh. And it was a match with Ric Flair and Kerry Von Erich. And so I asked him, I said, what's that move that guy Ric Flair is doing? So he showed it to me and put me in a figure 4 leg lock, and I couldn't get out of it. So I was so mad that next day I went in the Yellow Pages and looked for wrestling promotions, and I saw Pacific Polynesian Pro Wrestling, and I signed up.
Wow, just from that?
Just from that, just to get back at him.
And around what age were you at this time?
I think I was in my early 20s, 22, 23. And the woman in charge was Leah Maivia, The Rock's grandmother.
Wow.
Yeah, running the promotion with Lars Anderson. And I found out later on, Lars Anderson didn't like me because the fee for the wrestling school was $3,000. Oh
my! Which at that time was a lot of money. It's a lot of money now.
It is. Yeah. But for some reason, she liked me, and she let me in for only $500. And so the day we met to sign the contract and hand over the money, we're at this restaurant at a place on Kapiolani Boulevard. Used to be the old Chateau Bleu, and I ordered the mahi-mahi, and my ex-wife has something else. And then Leah Maivia says, I don't like this food, so I'm going to call my grandson downstairs to go get me Kentucky Fried Chicken. So I'm like, you sure you can bring KFC into this place? She's like, oh, they don't care. So this, very nice, polite young man comes down and says, oh, Grandma, what would you like? And she says, oh, the bucket of chicken. And he looks at me and my ex-wife. He says, sir, would you like anything? Ma'am, would you care for anything? I'm like, no, thank you very much. He said, wow, what a nice, polite young man. That was The Rock.
Wow. That's right, because he's living here. He went to school at McKinley.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa. Dang, this is crazy.
Yeah. So when he premiered, at Madison Square Garden, I think it was on Survivor Series, I'm like, hey, that's that kid.
Wow. Okay, so you got involved with learning to wrestle there, and where did your wrestling career take you? Because you had been wrestling for quite some time.
Quite some time. Yeah. At one point, a gentleman by the name of Hiro Sasaki stepped in, and that's when we learned strong style, learning how to shoot, Muay Thai, Sambo, and it pretty much went from there. And this was so long ago, but I kind of remember through a drunken haze wrestling an independent promotion in Florida, and I think Seattle, but those were like I call those my Jack Daniels days. I do remember getting drunk and daring a few of the other guys as we were walking back to our hotel. There was this dare, and I remember we're walking down the street and we're throwing back a bottle of Jack Daniels, and somebody says, "From here to the hotel, I dare anybody to headbutt the windshield on every single car in this sidewalk." And so I think I did 3, and that's all I remember.
That's all you remember. You may have done more, but
I may have done more.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are there any who are some of the names that you got to work with that we might recognize?
They're all guys on the indie circuit, but the one guy that sticks out the most to me was Chief Billy White Wolf.
Wow, yeah.
And who was Sheikh Adnan Al-Kaisi later on in the WWE.
Right.
Yeah, and he was up there, but man, his chops just hurt. I mean, he took skin and hair. I remember that. But real kind, giving guy in the ring, And I remember the night the match was being set up, and the booker said, Billy's tired. He wants to go home. He just got off the plane, so he's kind of jet lagged. He says, just, short beginning, short middle, short end, just take it home. So it was really that simple. And it was very, very cool. I haven't forgotten that.
Well, and about how many years would you say your wrestling career spanned?
God, total 17, but at some point, life happened.
Yeah.
So I took a break from it and then came back, I think, about 1999, and that's when Lars Anderson was, having a hard time making things work, and I think the thing that really saved everybody and motivated everybody to continue going on as far as the business is concerned is when Daryl Bonilla came along, because it was obvious that every promoter, whoever came through, was jealous of Daryl because he was a really good booker, had really good ideas, and his ideas were good because it was booking for the overall good of the promotion, to get people to attend the show. So it wasn't based on one person, sort of like the Hulk Hogan thing. His booking style is so everybody gets, some point to, get their spot, as they say in the business. And I remember I was with Lars. I was under the Black Rain mask, and we're doing a show in an old strip club off of Nimitz. And I walk out with my mask on, and there's Daryl Bonilla standing there, and I looked at him because we'd done theater before, and he didn't recognize me. Like, "Hey, Daryl." He's like, "Hey, what's up?"
And so you were involved in acting early on then, if you mentioned that you were in theater and stuff.
Yeah, pretty early on, but it's it's purely out of revenge that wrestling became my passion, and I think.
Did you ever get a chance to avenge that figure 4 from?
Oh yeah.
What happened with that?
Well, one time he decided a few years later on he wanted to wrestle, so he was in a Superfly Tui's wrestling school, and I got my revenge. But instead of putting him in the figure 4 leg lock, I put him in the Indian death lock, which is sort of a variation of the figure 4. But once you lock it in, you bridge back, and it sort of nearly fractures the shin.
Takes you right to that point right before.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So moving from there, how did you get involved? Because now most people will recognize you for all of your work with ghost stories and all that nature in the supernatural. How did you get involved with that?
Well, that's always been a part of my life. I was adopted as a kid. It's sounds like a strange story, but, Hawaiian kid adopted out to Portuguese Catholic family. And I've always had experiences and seen things. I was at Children's Hospital when I was about 7 years old getting a blood transfusion because my kidneys were dirty. And so they had to call my biological mother for medical records and all that stuff. Long story short, for the time that I was in Children's Hospital for about 6 months, my adopted grandmother would come during the day and spend time with me until my adopted parents came, and then she'd leave. But she would always leave before they came, and she would say, okay, your mom and dad should be here, so I have to get going. It was Grandma Lucy. And every day she came, she just told me stories about growing up and her encounters with ghosts and Wainaku and, Pele and all this stuff. And so finally the time comes for me to go home. And on the way home, my adopted parents asked me how was everything? Did you have fun? And I said, oh yeah, Grandma Lucy came every single day and, she'd spend time with me. And she told me about the time that they were in the Wailuku River when it was sort of empty, and this guy named Philip Di Coito, got taken away by a mo'o wahine. And my adopted parents were looking at me like this, and I'm going through all these stories, and, they're like, nobody knows those stories. I'm like, oh yeah, Grandma Lucy told me. So we get home, and we're eating dinner, and they sit me down. They said, we know how close you were to her, but we don't know how to tell you because we don't want to make you upset. You were sick. But while you were in the hospital, Grandma Lucy actually passed away, so you must have been hallucinating. And I said, no, because she would wear this dress that had the white flowers on it with the black petals underneath, and she wore the glasses with the thing, the string. So my adopted dad goes in the room, and he says, Grandma Lucy passed away, went to her funeral in Hilo. And he brings out the picture, and it's the same dress.
Whoa.
Yeah. So being Portuguese Catholics, they really couldn't make out, what was going on with me.
Right.
And so there's a lot of prayers and a lot of rosaries and what I think, when I think about it now, might have been an exorcism.
That they were trying to...
Yeah, but when I finally meet my biological mom and, I start to tell her everything that happened from the time I was born, she says, oh, no. She goes, you're not evil, you're not going to hell. She says, it's part of your culture.
Wow. So she knew that your family had that kind of...
Yeah, we all did.
Wow.
My older sister had a thing that had to be taken away from her, and her thing was she could look at someone and she would see what they would look like when they were in the coffin.
Oh.
Yeah. And so when she was 16 working at the old School Street McDonald's, somebody walked up to the window and she just freaked out because she said she saw this man, what he would look like laying down in the coffin, and it was horrendous because she said it was like the mortician did a poor job of piecing his face together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they had to call our Uncle Tom from the island of Ni'ihau to perform a ceremony and sort of, get rid of it.
Wow. And when they do these kind of ceremonies and they get rid of it, is it permanent or could it come back?
I think it can come back, but it sounds strange. But things like that, as far as not only Hawaiian culture but indigenous cultures, Asian cultures, I think it's embedded in your DNA.
So you feel like in your experiences that certain cultures have more of, I guess, a connection to this kind of the spiritual?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Why do you think that some other cultures don't have that?
I think because other cultures become more westernized or too westernized to the point where, they're not paying attention to that part of their culture anymore, even though it's inherently there. So when something does happen, when they see an apparition, it's just, it's computer screen reflection from the light from the refrigerator when I had it open. So they try to explain that away logically, but really it's something, that's a part of you.
Would you also say that maybe because if you're a part of a culture that embraces it, that when you open yourself up to it more, then I guess the energies will attract towards that as well more?
Absolutely. There's residual and cognitive signals in the environment. And so when they recognize a living person who can perceive them, then that's when communication starts to happen. Normally what that communication is when someone says, I heard a voice call my name, or they have like a finger mark bruise or something like that. So it's really not meant to hurt the person. It's just them seeing somebody like, somebody who understands, and now they want to reach out. If you're like all the way in Nova Scotia and you see another guy from Hawaii, hey.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do these spirits, are they able to travel to different parts of the world? I mean, it's a strange concept to me because as humans, we have to catch a plane to go to Nova Scotia, right? But as spirits, do they travel to other countries or other states, or do they kind of just stay in the area that they left in?
Well, and I'm sorry for a roundabout explanation, but in the School of Parapsychology and this study of parapsychology, it's a study of how the power of the human mind survives the physical death of its own body. So you can call it your soul or whatever it is, but it's a conscious mind that's now what do you call it? It's not an entity, but it's all the only way you can communicate is telepathically or through telekinesis. In a lot of cases, and you've heard cases of somebody who's dying in the hospital, but they're holding on for that one person to show up.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, as soon as that person passes away, there's almost, and you must know this in local culture, there's almost like a waiting period, like a 3 to 7 day time when this person who passes away has to go say goodbye to everybody. Mm-hmm. And so to answer your question, it's been documented that people can travel to go say goodbye to loved ones, way across the world. A woman who lives in Pennsylvania who was on my tour said that one day there was a knock on her door, and it was her uncle, Frank, who lived in Kaneohe, and she was stunned. She's like, "Uncle Frank, what are you doing here?" He says, "Oh, I came to say hi, but I really got to go to the bathroom." So she's like, "Okay, well, down the hallway to the right," and she watches him go down the hallway into the bathroom. And as soon as she saw her Uncle Frank go into the bathroom, her cell phone rang. She's like, "Hello," and she's looking down the hallway. And it's her mom, and her mom says, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but Uncle Frank just passed away."
Oh.
He'd been sick for a while. And she says, "Yeah, he just walked into my bathroom." And as she's saying this, she's walking down the hallway, and, she knocks on the door. "Uncle Frank, are you done?" No answer. Opens the door. Nobody's there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, so, they're very conscious about, who came and, who didn't come.
Yeah. So you said that you grew up with kind of recognizing these, I wouldn't want to say like powers, but
no.
these, I don't know, gifts, I guess, or intuitions. How do you describe that?
I describe it, and if you're doing comedy, you can steal this. I describe it as having an extra penny with your nickel. That's how I describe it.
So, like, Jamie's got this perplexed look on her face.
Yeah. Extra penny with your nickel? What does that make?
6 cents.
Oh my god, I'm so...
So as you grew up, take us to after, your family was trying to do the extrication to get rid of all the stuff. What happened from there? Was it a matter of maybe you started to kind of hide these things because you felt bad? Like what?
No, it just continued on until I became an angst-ridden teenager in high school. Then it kind of stopped, because my focus was elsewhere. Girls, school, fitting in, that whole thing. But there was a time when I was a junior in high school where I was completely healthy one day, and the next 2 days I was like deathly ill and couldn't even get up. So I remember a couple of my classmates came to my house, and I didn't know how they knew I was sick, but they literally dragged me out of the house and took me in the front driveway of my home and laid me down in the driveway under the sun, and they said, "You have to be in the sun. You'll feel better." And after like about a half an hour, I got to feel better. And they told me they both had this dream, and neither one of them knew about it, but they had this dream that I'd become suddenly sick by a classmate who was jealous. Yeah, and individually they had the dream, but they didn't know they both had the same dream, and they just had this urgency to come to my house and put me in the sun for some reason.
Wow,
Yeah.
so you think that jealous classmate would like put a curse on you or something?
Yeah, and it was over something really stupid. This girl he liked.
It always has to involve a girl.
Yeah. Happened to be standing at the Manapua truck at the same time I was, and we happened to be buying the same soda. And we just looked at each other and, hey, same soda. And she put her hand on my shoulder and he'd like, I'm going to kill him.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had a similar experience when I was working at Tower Records.
Wow.
In college, where my shift manager had a crush on one of the coworkers. And I didn't know this, and she was just talking to me during a shift. And then he told the owner this crazy story about how I was like insubordinate, and I told him to shut up, and the owner like just chewed me out and everything, and I had no idea what he was talking about, and he sent me home. I almost got fired, but he let me stay on and prove that I was actually a good worker. But unlike you, who just unceremoniously fired me for no reason from ACW.
Wow.
Maybe you were jealous of an encounter I had with one of the AZW fans. That's why he fired me, huh?
No, I was just mean.
So you kind of put these things aside, but when did you start to kind of gravitate back towards?
Two things happened. In late 1992, my mom called me because, we'd already been communicating, because she was my biological mom and all this stuff. But she called me and said that everything she'd learned and wanted to pass down to my younger brother, he didn't want to do it. He wasn't interested. So she said, would you mind coming and just learning all this stuff? I said, okay. So literally I sat at her feet and my aunt's feet at my mom's house, because I'd sit on the floor, they'd be on the chair, and just absorbed everything they had to talk about, whatever it was, whether it was, this big or this small, everything was a lesson. And that was 2 years. And she specifically said it will take 2 years to learn all of this. And so the very, very last thing she told me about was how the Pai and Lono side of our family had to go underground. We had to go into hiding once Kamehameha came into power. And I'm not sure what it had to do with. I'm thinking it's because something about that part of our family had something that could actually upend his rule. So we had to hide. And that was it. And I don't ever remember her going into specifics. And so went home, and the very next morning, my sister calls and says, Mom just passed away.
Wow.
Yeah. Because she was going to dialysis. And she said Mom was sitting at the kitchen table and was 2 weeks to sit up, and, my late brother-in-law had to take her to Kuakini Hospital. And when the interns came to get her from the car, suddenly she was this woman of massive strength and was fighting them off and telling them, I'm going to go on my own. And she took 2 steps and passed away.
Wow.
Yeah. And so when I got to the chapel a couple hours later, they had her laying down, covered with a blanket. And in Hawaiian, I knelt down next to her and I said, Mom, we still have more to learn. And tears start coming down from her eyes.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I didn't really realize what that was until I began to seriously study the field of parapsychology, which I'm pursuing a degree in. And so, the conscious mind is still alive, even though the body's dead.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you ever been able to communicate with her since?
Oh, every time I mess up, she shows up and lets me have it. Yeah. Every time I go left, she shows up. No, over there, stupid. There's these moments in your life where you're about to make a really dumb decision.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And she'll come along somehow and just like, ow! Literally.
So are you able to describe like how you interact or how she shows up? Like for someone like myself who maybe hasn't had these kind of experiences, is there a way that you can explain or articulate these kind of things?
In our culture, our loved ones who pass away never really leave us. And that's why in some Hawaiian families they were never afraid of ghosts, because 90% of the time the ghost was a member of your family. And just like how they do in Samoan culture, we buried our dead in the front yard or under the house. And if you were a member of our family and you had status in the community, we'd do you the honor of putting you in the imu and steaming the flesh off your bones, and then we'd keep your bones and perform a ceremony called unihipili, which is a deification ceremony. So if our ʻaumākua is the shark, then we deify you into becoming a shark guardian.
Oh.
You know, so you're the one that chases all the fish into our net, or if we're going to go, you know, sailing one day, you know, you'll show up and like, hey, maybe not today, you know, or maybe not that guy in the canoe, you know. So you are our shark ʻaumākua, and I always say this to a lot of people because a friend of mine who's a professor of Hawaiian studies said it to me, and that is, if your ʻaumākua is a shark, it's only that shark. That's your ʻaumākua. So certainly you cannot jump into a school of sharks and expect not to be bitten. So in that capacity, my mom is still around. So I think a year after my daughter was born, and we're living off of Date Street, and we're on the 3rd floor. So the front door was here, and the lanai, you know, was back here, and it was hot. So we had the futon in the middle of the floor, and we're all sleeping. And in the middle of the night, I smell a Vicks vapor rub, because that's what my mom put on her chest every night before she went to sleep. And I feel this foot insert itself under my back and start going like this. And I wake up, and my mom's standing there in her, you know, blue Bermuda shorts, her regular kalihi poi shirt. And I smell the Vicks vapor rub, and I'm like, I look up, I'm like, what? She's like, stupid. You sleeping in between the 2 doors. You know the spirits walk when get doors in alignment like this. She goes, move the baby. You know, like the baby in the way. It's like, okay. So wake up, and, you know, just pull the futon this way and lie back down. And then a second later, I'm like, what the hell? Yeah, but that's how my mom does it.
I know a lot of people talk about how they get visited in their dreams by loved ones and stuff. Is there a reason why there's, I guess, more communication between, you know, spirits when people are sleeping?
Well, they say your mind's a lot more receptive when you're sleeping, but there's also a lot of residual stuff during the day, you know, that comes back in your dreams. So even like random thoughts about a garbage can will become a bigger dream when you go to sleep. So a lot of that, you know, is also wishful thinking. But if a loved one visits you in your dream and specifically tells you, Nolan, if a woman dressed in red approaches you with a Rhodesian ridgeback, do not take her out for dinner. You know, something like that. You know, very, very specific. You don't think about it. And a couple of days later, here's a pretty Chinese girl dressed in red with a Rhodesian ridgeback. You're like, oh my God. You know, so when those visitations are real, there's specific messages in those dreams that make sense in your living days, your waking life, so to say. But majority of it is just, you know, memories or wishful thinking, you know, things you want to happen.
And what's to keep from, like, so let's say if I were to pass away and I really miss Jamie, why wouldn't I, what's to keep me from just hanging out with her all the time, like as a spirit, and just continuing on our relationship, like, you know, communicating back and forth? Like,
well, that's the thing, you know, when you die, you don't suddenly become this angel that's, you know, that has all the knowledge in the world. You know, you've passed away, you know, your physical part of you has passed away, but you're still Nolan Hong. You know, so there's no reason why you shouldn't hang out, you know, after you're gone. It's entirely up to you. What a lot of people don't realize is the conscious mind survives, and in that capacity, it can choose how it wants to appear. You know, if you like yourself better as Nolan Hong now as opposed to Nolan Hong at, you know, 98, or Nolan Hong at 7 years old, it's up to you how you want people to perceive you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. So, okay, so as you got older, when did you start to get into the world of storytelling and tours and things like that?
Oh, so like I was going to say, you know, 1993, my mom passes away. The following year, I'm dancing hula for my cousin, Keone Nunes. And at my job back then, people kept talking about this ghost tour around the Iolani Palace and this haole guy who's a professor of American history at UH. So I finally went, and the funny thing was, it was only like 5 minutes into his walking tour, and I realized everything this guy is talking about is everything I've learned growing up, except now there's documentation and historical fact, to back it up, even though it's ghost stories. And a week later at Hula, my cousin says, okay, by the way, and it's all guys in the halau, he says, we're going to start dancing on this ghost tour in Waianae for my really good friend Glenn Grant. And my cousin and I were like the alaka'i, so we had to go to everything my older cousin did. And I think it was a couple of years later, Keone had to go to work in Washington, D.C., and so he told Glenn, I can't do the Waianae tour. And Glenn said, well, I don't know your half of the tour. I only know my half. It's like, what's going to happen? So Keone says, well, Lopaka knows it, so he can do it. And so I did it. I guess it went okay, because that following Monday, Glenn called me and says, hey, that was pretty good. I was like, well, thanks. I was just doing what my cousin asked. He says, yeah, don't say anything, but it was actually a lot better than the way he does it. He said, if I can give you some work, would you mind? I'm like, no problem. Until finally about, I think, 1999, is when the training started.
So on that first day, was it just a matter of you, I guess, imitating what you had seen your cousin do before, or was it more something that just came natural to you? It's a pretty big deal to lead a tour of people and things like that.
Yeah, I guess it came naturally, and I'd already had my own tidbits of information, as far as sacred places in Waianae and ghosts. So, according to Glenn, I wasn't Keone, I was myself. Mm-hmm. Which I think was the difference.
And were you already involved in performing and acting before that? Or
yeah. In fact, at the same time, I was in a production that was sponsored by Kamehameha Schools Bishop Estate. It was a play called Family Laundry. It was the best acting gig I ever had because it was $1,000 a week.
Wow.
Yeah. Holy smokes. Yeah, that's when Bishop Estate was, large.
Yeah.
They didn't get busted yet.
We would kill for that now.
Oh, yeah.
So then you got to working with Glenn Grant, mm-hmm. And so how'd that relationship evolve?
He's like my Jewish dad, and he was very strict about getting everything right, especially historical facts and study and documentation. The one thing he told me is he didn't want me to be him, just develop it my own way, my own style. And he also said, eventually you'll collect your own ghost stories, and, it'll kind of be like your tour. He also said, because I'm Hawaiian, I can't make any mistakes. He says, for me as a haole, they forgive me because I'm white. He says, but for you, if you mess up, they'll crucify you. He said, I have no doubt. And I remember one night at a poetry reading, I got a fact about Pele wrong, and he just crucified me, like in front of everybody. Wow. So that's how serious he was about it. And when it was finally time, he was hosting a book signing for Nanette Napoleon's book called Oahu Cemetery in the store. I was standing off to the side, eating andagi and drinking soda. And he goes, everybody, by the way, he goes, I just want to tell everybody that, now I have a Hawaiian that can do these ghost tours. And up to then, he kept saying, literally, it shouldn't be me. It should be a local guy or a Hawaiian person. So as he's talking about this Hawaiian guy who can do the tour, I'm like, wow, who is it? Yeah. So those were pretty big shoes.
So, is it as far as the ghost stories and things? Mm-hmm. Is it a lot of it doing your research and such? And where do you research these things? Because
everywhere. Hamilton Library, the archives. What's that other place? Office of Conveyances. Especially when we're talking about places that are haunted, neighborhoods, buildings, real estate. There's so much research you have to do. How far back does this building go? When was it built? What was there before?
And to tie that in with your sixth sense, does that play a factor into your craft as well?
Yeah, it happens when it happens, and a lot of times it just happens on the spur of the moment. I don't expect it to happen, and people have broken down crying, And sometimes it's not even on a ghost tour. We're at the Spalding Museum up in the Makiki Heights, negotiating 13 ghost stories at the museum. And the young gentleman was sitting in front of me, and his assistant, an older local Chinese woman, was there. And he was going over, the specifics and everything. And I looked at this woman, and I said, is your aunt buried at a Chinese cemetery? She says, yes. I said, is it the one in Manoa? And she says, yes. And then I told her, your aunt says that she likes it when you guys bring food, but don't leave the food because she doesn't like the ants. Wow. And the woman just lost it. She lost it. She's like, oh my God, that's what I've been trying to tell my mom.
Wow. Yeah. So sometimes the spirits will come to you hoping that you will convey a message to your loved one.
And a lot of times there are your loved ones hanging around, but for some reason, depending upon where you are in your life, they can't get through to you. So they, believe me, this is certainly true. They try to find the next person who they can talk to, give you the message.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so when you go on, when you go into this career of ghost telling, is it something that you thought, okay, this is what I'm called to do, or did it take a lot of experience or maybe some goading by others to get you into this?
I knew this is what I was meant to do. The difficult part was connecting with the right business-minded person, as you know, from before. So when I finally met the woman who was going to become my wife, we met in a graveyard on my tour, actually.
That's not a normal place to meet your future wife, right?
We're at Oahu Cemetery, May 2009, and I said, nobody take pictures until I tell you. This huge blinding flash goes off, and I'm like, I just freaking told you. It's Jerry Seinfeld. What are you doing? No pictures. But afterwards, I found her on Facebook. I'm like, hey, I'm sorry. And she's like, it's okay. And then, got back at her and married her. But she was, the business-minded person that handled that part of it. And she's made it so easy for me to, not have to chase customers down anymore. Now we've got everything set up on the website, and literally all I have to do is show up and talk. And I've had sold-out shows at the MAC, the Kilauea Theater in Hilo. We're trying to plan something on Kauai, and I have a regular gig every quarter over at Doris Duke Theater. So it's gotten to that level. But as far as the storytelling goes, and my wife has said this herself, a lot of times she thinks she's seen everything that I'm capable of, and then how did she put it? Then you'll get possessed by the story, and you'll just raise the level and freak everybody out.
So is it a matter of you're constantly trying to get more or learn more, get more stories and things like that? Or now is it to a point where it just kind of comes to you? And
yeah, well, it's always come to me. And this was always going to be my path, no matter, which venue I took to get here. God, I hope that doesn't sound conceited, but I was meant to be here, and it's, as you know yourself, it's hardly a thing where someone gets to make a living off of the very thing they love to do. Mm-hmm. So I'm one of the lucky few, as you are.
Yeah. So describe for those listening. I mean, you mentioned these shows, you got tours. Kind of give us an idea of what you're doing. I'm sure you're doing a ton of things, and what they could expect as far as who might be interested in taking one of these tours or seeing one of these shows.
Well, the website is mysteries-of-hawaii.com, and I think there's about 4 or 5 tours. For some reason, the most popular one is the Ghost of Old Honolulu Downtown Walking Tour.
Is that the one that I took?
Around the palace?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I got to do that. What was that? 2009, I think, is when I took that tour with you.
Well, the thing about these tours is that it's never the same tour twice. And I'm always looking for new ways to evolve. The scariest tour is actually the one I've been thinking about not doing anymore because I think that place needs a rest. It's the ghost tour out to Waianae. And the good thing is on these ghost tours, I never guarantee that anybody's going to see anything or something's going to happen because whatever does or doesn't happen actually depends upon the kind of people that come on that tour.
Right.
And sort of like the collective energy. So in the past few years, there have been people with unusual energies or unresolved issues who come on the Waianae tour and things happen to them. I remember one doctor got followed by the ghost of a little boy in a cave in Waianae, and I think that boy was murdered in that cave. And when we have women on the tour who have unresolved issues, for some reason a ghost of a 17-year-old girl shows up and starts asking them, "Excuse me, do you have a hairbrush? Can I borrow your hairbrush?"
Huh.
Yeah.
Now, when you say that little boy followed that doctor,
Yeah.
What followed him all the way home, or just around the tour area?
Followed him back to his hotel in Waikiki.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think there was some sort of affinity that ghost of that little boy might have had for the doctor. They may have had something in common. My personal feeling is whoever that little boy was, he was possibly abused before he was murdered. And so I suspect that the doctor may have had a history of abuse himself. Being abused, that is.
Oh, okay.
You know, so sometimes even though they're no longer of the flesh, there's still that kinship with the living.
Yeah.
You know.
Did the doctor know that he was followed?
Did the doctor know that he was being followed?
Yeah, because the doctor called me at 3 a.m. Yeah. There's a ghost in my hotel room. I'm like, I'm sorry, what hotel is it? And he said it was the Lima Hotel off of Kuia. I was like, no, that's not haunted. He was like, I think it's on the tour.
And so what happens after? I mean, is it a matter of you just got to let the ghost go on his way, or did you need to do something to help him?
Yeah, we needed to go back to the cave and help the ghost of the little boy understand that, you know, that's where he's supposed to stay.
Wow. So if you didn't do that, in this case, would the ghost of the little boy kind of be lost? Because let's say he leaves the doctor back in town.
Yeah.
Does he have a hard time? Would he have a hard time finding his way back to the cave?
You know, that would actually be up to him, really.
Oh. I guess that's kind of like the same scenario here. Like if it was a physical boy alive, up to him if he decides if he wants to try to figure out how to get back, right?
Yeah, yeah. And you'll know because kids will make it known, you know, I don't want to be here. But in his case, I think my personal feeling is there is an affinity between him and the doctor, and I think the doctor was abused as a child.
And so when you go on these tours, it's about a couple hours and go to different places?
The walking tour is about an hour and a half, so there's one in downtown Honolulu, there's one in Mo'iliili, and there's a third walking tour in Waikiki where we visit 3 haunted hotels. Used to be 4, but I've been banned from the 4th. Because the general manager was like, I don't want people to know my hotel's haunted. I'm like, everybody knows it's haunted.
Yeah, I would think that would not be a good marketing plan for them.
No.
Come stay at the haunted hotel here on Kuhio Street.
And the bus tour to the Pali Lookout, you know, that's pretty interesting too. I'm actually glad the landslide happened.
Why is that?
Because, you know, at night I see a lot of drunk kids, you know, show up and, you know, go walk down the road, and who knows what might happen to them.
Yeah.
And then I do customized tours. So if people only want to go to graveyards or only night marcher trails, you know, wherever they want to go is where I can customize a tour specifically for them. I think about four years ago, the weekend of Valentine's, there were 15 married couples, and they were willing to pay like $60 each. And I remember spending about a week trying to talk the woman who was organizing the tour out of doing it. And she kept telling me, no, it's funny, you don't see the humor of it. I'm like, no, I don't get it, because it's the weekend of Valentine's, but they thought it would be funny to only go to places where there are double murder suicides.
What?
Yeah, where couples killed each other.
What a morbid sense of humor this woman has.
All right. So I remember we got on the bus, and we were like 45 minutes into the tour, And the men on the tour started getting upset because they finally realized the majority of the murders were committed by women on their cheating husbands.
Oh.
Yeah, so like, no, you take us back and do a Hawaiian prayer, so we can be protected. I'm like, but if you're not doing anything wrong, then why?
Yeah.
It was an interesting experience.
And then you mentioned you had some shows, Outer Islands. Do you do walking tours on Outer Islands as well, or are these like stage kind of like storytelling shows?
It's become more like ghost storytelling concerts.
Huh.
Yeah. It's sort of like, a live stand-up thing, but it's ghost stories. And fortunately, they've been received very well. And I would have to say, the good thing about my content is it's not meant to insult anybody's intelligence. They're real stories that happen to real people. And the unique thing about these stories is that, they're happening today. And so what I mean by that is, take for instance, the pig god Kamapua'a.
Uh-huh.
My baby cousin and my girl cousin's late husband were working on the H3 on the Halava side. And they're both pig hunters. So one day, baby cousin, my cousin's late husband, sitting together on the side of the road eating lunch. And so down the hill, there's these, tea leaf, and they see this huge pig just kind of like emerge from the bush. And they said it's a really big pig. The tusks are like this. And my cousin's late husband, George, picks up this monkey wrench and runs down the hill chasing after it. And so he told me this personally before he passed away, but he said he's chasing after this pig. And they're getting to this clearing. And he says, all of a sudden, this voice in his head says, George, what are you going to do if this pig stops? And they're in the middle of the clearing, and the pig stops. And he says the nearest tree that he can run to is like 100 yards away or something, or 100 feet. And he looked around, he says, okay, I knew I wasn't going to make it. I was going to die, so, I was going to go down fighting. And so he says, I had this huge monkey wrench. I figured if I whacked it on the back of the shoulder, maybe it would slow it down. And he looks, he says, and I grabbed the wrong monkey wrench. It was a small one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm sorry, pipe wrench, the huge pipe wrench.
Right,
so
right.
he's like, so he said this thing is charging toward him. And he says, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this really tall Hawaiian guy with a black feathered cape and big bushy hair, big beard, just appears out of nowhere and grabs this 300-400 pound pig like a football, like this. And he said he looked at George, and then he looked like this, and then he walked off, into the trees. But he said the feather capes kind of like stood up like this. And it was actually, he said it was actually the bristles of a pig. So he said that was Kamapua'a.
Whoa.
The pig god.
Holy crap.
Yeah. And George, everybody was afraid of George because he was naturally, big, strong, wide guy, solid. And it took George about maybe almost an hour to just get through the story because most of the time he was tearing up and crying. Mm-hmm. But after his death, I found out that he had, before that encounter, for some reason, he'd erected an altar, like an ahu, in his backyard to Kamapua'a. And, so for him, it was this validating experience that, he wasn't worshiping something that didn't exist because it actually manifested in front of him. But a lot of people in our family were warning him about doing that because, there's old practices, and I agree myself, there's old practices that should not be revived because a lot of those practices required a human life. So about a month after that experience, George committed suicide.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know what I've wanted to ask is, I don't know the science behind it, but I always hear that, there's a lot of spiritual activity around like signal waves and things like that.
Electromagnetic fields?
Right.
Yeah.
So would you say that because of everybody's now on technology, on cell phones, there's so much more electromagnetic fields, I would say, nowadays more than ever, does that mean that there's a lot more paranormal activity than usual?
There tends to be a higher concentration of paranormal activity around electromagnetic fields or vortex, ley lines, portholes. But at the same time, if you're living next to an electrical plant, it also messes up the paranormal energy, but really screws with your equilibrium. And so I've been to places where people have said their house is haunted, but it's actually all that stuff from the electric wires.
Oh.
A lot of times it's also mold.
Huh.
You know, and people tend to misunderstand that the house is settling or it's wiring, you know, and so 90% of the time it's the, well, no, 10% of the time it's a real haunting. 90% of the time it's very, very explainable.
Oh.
And 90% of the time it's the people who have the problem. The house is fine. So in my experience too, when people are having personal problems that they feel are too severe to handle, they would rather say that it's a spirit or a demon or a haunting rather than acknowledge the fact that your wife is having an affair.
Right.
Right. A woman called me and said that she believed her son was possessed because he wasn't the same person anymore. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you know, ever since he's been dating this girl, he's now a vegetarian and, you know. Yeah, and he's changed religions. I'm like, yeah, he's not possessed. Not by anything demonic.
He's just growing up.
Yeah, like, and he says these things that he never says, and he doesn't listen to me. I'm like, yeah, he's not possessed.
Sounds like something my mom would say about me.
But there was an instance a few years back where a Hawaiian family who lived in Kapolei called me for about a month, and I kept recommending them to Kaleo Patterson, who was a kahu, or really a Catholic priest, because they said their daughter was possessed by a demon. And so I told them it's not really my thing, but you know, here's who you can call, and I gave the names of all the people. And I told them, you know, if it really is an exorcism, it's going to take a while because there's all this red tape before it can get approved, you know, sometimes by the Vatican. And about a month later, they called me and they said, you know, it didn't work out. The priest they talked to was very rude, you know, and condemned them. But, you know, would you come to the house and at least, you know, go look at our daughter and talk to her? I'm like, oh my God. So went down there, really nice local Hawaiian couple. And from the kitchen, they said the stairs go up this way and there's a landing, and they said it's the left door on the landing. So knock on the door opens, you know, nice looking Hawaiian girl. And it just opens the door and goes, plops herself on her bed and is on her laptop. And there's kind of this awkward silence. So I'm like, oh, so, you know, your parents tell me you're possessed. She's like, yeah. I'm like, so you are possessed? She's like, she gives me this look like, really? I said, well, you know, why would they think you're possessed? And she goes like this. She goes, well, look. And around the room is everything Twilight, you know, curtains, posters, bed sheets, you know, pillowcases, you know. So I'm like, really? Like, is that why they think you're possessed? And she goes, well, and also the fact, she says, you know, I came out of the closet.
Oh.
You know, I told them I'm a lesbian. It's like, oh my God. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, you know, I'm so sorry. So at the door was this table, so I put my business card on the table and it says, you know, listen, anytime you want to talk, you know, we don't have to talk about this. If you want to just talk, unload, get stuff off your chest, just call me and my wife will go meet you and just, you know, whatever you want to say. She says, okay, thanks. I said, oh, you know, by the way, my name's Lopaka. She says, hi, I'm Sienna. I said, okay, nice to meet you. Got downstairs, you know, and the parents are like, is everything okay? You know, was she violent? Were things floating around the room? I said, you know what, you guys need family counseling. I said, this is ridiculous. I said, you know, Sienna, I just talked to her. She's like perfectly normal. And the father goes, no, our daughter's name is Carolyn.
Whoa.
The thing that's possessing her is Sienna.
Yikes.
Yeah, and I swear to you, when I looked back up the stairs, she was looking out the door like this at me. And she just stepped into the room and closed the door. But the second her door closed, from the door, the wall down the stairs to the kitchen, that whole side of the house went. Yeah.
So whatever happened to her?
I said, so, I was like, so here's this number to this place. Call this person. Yeah, but it turns out a lot of the neighborhood around Kapolei High School is they got a lot of stuff happening.
Oh, is it kind of like a hot area?
Yeah, the entire Ewa Plains from like Soda Creek to Barbers Point, historically it's known as the Plains of Kaupe'a, or the realm of restless spirits. So even when they were thinking about developing that area, Hawaiians were going to those board meetings and telling them, there's these artesian wells that have these spirits. There's night marchers coming through here. There's an old Menehune fishing village, and but they didn't listen, and they're continuing not to listen. So, in a way, even though it sounds bad, the more development there is, the more they'll keep me in business, I guess.
I guess that's why it's so cheap out there. I've always wanted to know more about Menehunes. Because we have several friends that always will share stories and things like that. But, and you don't have to go too far into detail and such, but what is the deal with Menehunes? What's up with these guys?
Well, historically, it is believed that there were already people here in this archipelago before the mass migration from the South Pacific, and that those people were the first Hawaiians. So when the invasion came from Tahiti and Samoa, and they introduced the Ali'i class system and met these Hawaiians on Molokai, because apparently the Tahitian and Samoan people were tall, they call these people manuhune, or people with little power. And so the story is that those people went up into the mountains and hid and, wouldn't come down. There's a family that one part of the family is in Ka'u and the other part is here. They're the same family, but their kuleana has always been from time immemorial to feed the Menehune 1 month out of the year. And so this family goes up to the Pali Lookout a certain time of the year, and they lay down the mats and bring out the foods, and it's certain types of fish, a certain variety of mai'a or banana, and I forget what the other one is, but that's what they do every year. And supposedly the march of the Menehune comes from Manuka Park in Ka'u down or up the island chain. And so when they come here, they stop at what is now the Pali Lookout to have their food, and then they move on to Kauai. So one night I had a midnight tour, a very small group. The Pali Lookout was open, and we're heading out to the lookout, and here comes the family. I was like, oh my God. I was like, oh crap, we can't go out there. Because they didn't want to be disrespectful. And I recognized the woman, and, like 2 men and women with her, and she looked really mad. I says, aloha tutu. She's like, oh, aloha. She goes, no, can go out there. I'm like, sorry, we'll leave. I said, what's the matter? You look mad. And she stopped. She goes, you know why I'm mad? It's those Kamehameha Schools people. I blame them. I said, well, what happened? She said, when we leave for the Menehune, I have to be certain kind, i'a, mai'a, and maybe uala. But she said, tonight, when we came for take all the stuff away, no more the uala. Somebody will take them and put something else. And that's how I know Kamehameha Schools, somebody responsible. I said, what do you mean? Instead of the uala inside the bowl, get haole brownies. She goes, do you know now, from now on, every year, now we have to bring haole brownie. That's how I know Kamehameha Schools, somebody. And yeah, that's a true story.
What would be kind of like your most memorable experience on a tour? And other things. Yeah. When you see these things, do people on your tour also see them, or is it more just you see them so that you can guide it?
Absolutely. I see it so I know where to be or where not to be. Uh-huh. And sometimes seeing them helps me realize that we can or cannot be there. So sometimes according to what's there, we got maybe 5 minutes, maybe 15, and sometimes can't be there at all. One night the night marchers were coming down the road, and people smelled the sulfur, and you could hear the drums. And the unfortunate thing about that is I had to make sure these 40 people got on the bus, and I had to be the last one. So I'm like, hurry up, let's go. And as the 40 people are running toward the bus, I guess the bus driver knew what was going on, so he starts reversing down the road, and 40 people are chasing after the bus. I'm throwing my shoe at him like, slow down. Yeah. You probably know this. The most memorable one is when I was doing tours for Glenn and still wrestling. And I asked Glenn's partner not to book this particular night because I had a wrestling match. But she would do that. I tell her not to book a night, and she'd do it anyway. And so I was double booked. I had a ghost tour and I had a wrestling match, and I couldn't get out of either. So the bus was full. I remember that. And I got on the bus, and before we left, I told the people, I said, okay, here's what's going on. We have a problem. I said, I've been booked to do this ghost tour, but I've also been booked to do a wrestling match at the same time, which is not too far from here. I said, so here's what's going to happen. The bus is going to pull into the venue. You guys are going to get out. You're going to go in, sit in the front row. I'm going to go downstairs, get my instruction from the booker, and I'm pretty sure what's going to happen is I'll just run in the ring, beat this guy up, and pin him, and then I'll leave. And as soon as I leave, you guys leave. And so they're looking at me like, yeah, sure. And then I get on the phone with Paris, what's his name, Dave Hart, and I'm like, okay, we're working the whole thing out. And sure enough, the people on the tour, their eyes like wide open because we're actually pulling into the venue at the wrestling match. I'm like, okay, go in through that door. And they walk in, they sit down. I go downstairs and I do my thing, run in the ring, 1, 2, 3. And they're in the bus and I go downstairs, whatever. And as soon as I get in the bus and I walk on the bus, I'm like, so is anybody going to give me any problems? They're like, no. And then big round of applause.
Probably never been more over in a wrestling match.
Yeah, but everybody says, wow, a wrestling match and a ghost tour.
You should charge them double for that. That might be your next tour.
That might be my next tour.
I think there's some legs to this one.
Yeah, so what's his name? Former Aaron Caruso, he actually posted it on my profile a couple of months ago.
A picture from that?
The video.
There's video of that.
Of that actual match.
We need to get this video. We need to show. We got to find that link, and we're going to put it on the description of the podcast so people could see that.
What's his name? He's on Facebook, George Melvinko?
Well, shout-outs to George Melvinko.
Yeah, I'll go find it, and I'll send it to your
Perfect.
profile.
Awesome.
So as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh, my God, take that down. Like, no, everybody loves it.
So the other part of your career is that you're an accomplished actor in a lot of different shows and movies and such. So, do you find that that you get kind of typecast a lot because of your career and your talents, or are you able to get a lot of different types of roles?
With the 5-0 thing, it's always been the guy who gets shot. No matter what the role is. The first 5-0 thing was a UPS driver. I had some dialogue and I got shot because, it's my 25th anniversary. And the second time I had dialogue and they cut it, just showed me getting killed, which is fine. But I've done a couple of movies, German movies, like Movie of the Week.
Oh.
And the thing is, they always come here to shoot it, and it's always on Maui. So I played a chief of police in one German production and a Marquesan lawyer in another one. So those have been fun. And a lot of independent films, too. Dreams of a Pagan Tattooed Savage, Red Hibiscus, and some other stuff I probably can't remember.
And when it comes to those roles, there's roles where you play a ghost storyteller or
oh, yeah.
things. Is it pretty much another day at the office for you? Or
pretty much.
do they give you lines? Or you just make your own script?
Yeah, they're like, just say it the way you say it. Parts of the same circle. That's right. I never got to see that. They ran out of DVDs before I could buy one.
I think I might have. See, I was in that movie, but we were shooting on different days.
Okay.
But when I watched it, I was like, hey, Lopaka's in this too. And it made perfect sense because it was about death and things like that.
Yeah, Robert Pennebaker called me. He says, everybody I know is in that movie.
But are you able, with your schedule, it seems like you're getting a lot of work. Are you still able to do acting and things and pursue
that?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Thankfully, my schedule is such that because I own the business, I can arrange it to happen. My only regret is I've always wanted to do Kumukahua or, Shakespeare Festival.
And you've never done that?
Never had the time.
That's interesting. I would have assumed that you've done that because, that is... that would be perfect for you.
I never did HTY because, once you sign a contract with them, they own you. A friend of mine had the flu and he still had to go do a show.
Well, that's kind of, for you, I think that's no problem because that's kind of the way the professional wrestling is, right? Like you can have your arm missing, you still got to do the
job. The other thing is, and I hope it doesn't come across petty, but it's also a matter of finances because I have my wife and 5 kids and 3 grandkids, and so I've got mortgage to pay, family to feed, and I kind of regret that it's those kinds of things that are preventing me from doing theater.
Well, I think that's an issue we all, as actors and performers, have to tackle.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is for the love. It's not for the money. That's for sure.
Oh, definitely. Which is why I can't do any wrestling. But when work opens up that pays good, I always make sure that I call somebody that I know from the community, because I don't ever want to hire somebody to do a film that I'm helping with, or maybe a storytelling festival, and not pay them. Mm-hmm. You and I have been through that experience, so I want to make sure that people I know get paid.
Well, that is a quality that is rare these days. So I commend you on that and appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll get to you soon, Nolan. I got storytelling friends that are just like, hey, what are you doing? Like, I'm doing this storytelling thing. Why don't you do like 10 minutes of stories? Just as an opening. And the funny thing is, I feel bad because they'll show and they'll do their best work, and they're not expecting to get paid. Yeah. So when I give them a check, they're like, oh my God, money. Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, do you ever have the trouble? I assume you have this happen a lot, like when people meet you in public and they ask you what you do for a living, you tell them that they want like free work, essentially, like, oh, so tell us some stories. Do you get that all the time?
Oh yeah, can you tell us a story? No.
It's kind of like the comedian, like, oh, tell me a joke. It's like, well, are you going to pay for it? Yeah. This is my job. This is what I do for a living, right?
Well, for some reason, because of the way I look, people don't approach me too much, even though they know who I am. Like, you're really scary in person.
Well, what do you hope? Do you have any hopes for the future as far as the community? I mean, you said you're getting your master's and such, but as far as the storytelling community and all that, what kind of visions or hopes do you have for the future?
First of all, I would like to break away from the storytelling and the tours and find somebody or a few people to train. But because I've started doing more writing, more books, and I've got about 5 or 6 that are ready to go, and I enjoy doing that. Just got to find the right people to train. What was the other part of your question?
Well, what do you hope for the community of the storytellers and?
Well, the thing is, I think I know everybody has a story to tell. So even you, Nolan, in your capacity of all the things you've done, you've probably got a wealth of cool stories, and they don't have to be ghost stories. And the great thing about storytelling is you get to see a bit of every person's life, and hear all those things that actually brought them to the point where they're at now. And some of those stories are heart-wrenching, and other stories are just funny as hell. There's a taxi driver who came a few years ago and told all these stories about these different clients that he met. But the most heartbreaking story was about a prostitute that he would give a ride to all these places to meet these guys. And in between those sessions, he got to know her, she got to know him, and they got really close. And eventually, they'd fallen in love. And she fell in love with him because she realized that he loved her for who she was. He could see who she was inside. And so he said on the last night when she told him, that was it, this was going to be the last customer and they'd be together. And he waited downstairs for her and she never came down. And she was murdered.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, on that uplifting note, I love you for who you are, Lopaka.
Right. And then you get guys who just tell these stories that are just like so funny. The guy who went to the deep South, a comedian, and he saw the rebel flag and everything. So the first thing he said was, "So, how's everybody doing? With the Dukes of Hazzard?" And he says, all of a sudden, people are throwing things at him. And he said it took him a while to register that these people were going to beat the hell out of him. Yeah. And they chased him outside, and it's the way he tells it is just so funny. And so finally he got out okay, and when security was sure that nobody was going to kill him, and it's a white guy, he's walking to his car, and he says, all of a sudden, this huge biker guy comes up to him, and he says, I can see the biker guy is drunk out of his mind. And he says the guy pulls his fist back like this, and he said the guy was drunk, so the punch came in slow motion. So all he did was move like this, and the guy in slow motion, spun around and fell on his face. And he was like, this is so stupid. And the guy got up and says, all right, that's one for you, but if I ever get up off of this ground, I'm going to give you a second one. And the guy threw up all over his feet.
Oh, I'd rather have gotten punched in the face than getting thrown up on.
Right. But again, it was his delivery. It was just such a funny story. It couldn't help, everybody was like crying in tears.
That brings me to a thought. So comedians, they tend to have to deal with like hecklers and things like that. Do you have that problem with people on your tours that either are disrespectful or maybe heckle you during your tours?
I had a couple when Glenn was still around, but as soon as I went into business for myself, it hardly ever happened. There was one tour when Glenn was still around, a guy everywhere we went he was like, oh, and making all these stupid noises and saying dumb things. And so we got back to the store, and I waited outside for him. And it was funny because he was obviously prejudiced, but it was his honeymoon, and his wife was Asian.
Weird, okay.
Yeah. So he got out of the bus, and I got right in his face. I said, so is there a problem? He's like, he takes off running. I'm like, God, what an idiot. Yeah, but I think the only real problem I have is, people post comments on my fan page about the price of the tours. Oh. But my wife says, don't worry about it, because probably people who can't afford it anyway.
Right.
At the Doris Duke Theater, I thought I had a heckler, but it was actually a guy who was screaming because somebody was coming down the row and they stepped on his foot.
Oh.
Yeah. There's a woman with stiletto heels, so he was like, son of a...
Would you call me? Well, this has been just so much fun, and I really appreciate you coming down and spending this time with us. And I'd love to have you on again in the future. I feel like we still got so much more to talk about. You have such an interesting life. And there's all other things that I know about you that we haven't even touched yet. So,
do we want to talk about that?
That'll be for the premium content.
Premium. Yeah, we can talk about Chinese ghosts in Hawaii, Japanese ghosts, because they're here.
Wow, that would be so amazing. Well, I'm just surprised that Jamie's still here in the studio, because she was telling me that at one point she may just get up and run out of the room because she's terrified of these things. But you made it so comfortable for her, and we really appreciate you. Dr. Emmett Bean's hiding under the sofa, maybe because he's not so brave. But yeah, thank you so much, and good luck with everything, man. It's just so neat to see where you've gone and where you've come from, and I'm super stoked about the success you're seeing to this very day.
Oh, no, my pleasure. I'm honored to be here.
All right. Thank you again so much to Lopaka for taking time out to come down and hang out with us. Jamie, good job. You were able to stay here the whole time. And I hope you were entertained and enjoyed that one. If you want to hear more of Lopaka, hopefully we'll have him on again real soon. And if you have any questions, please send them over to us. You can either comment on our Facebook page or leave a comment on the website as well. That's where our podcasts are housed. And speaking of the podcast, we are now official, baby. We are available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Music Play, all the major podcast streaming apps. We are on there. So what would be a really big help is if you subscribe, rate, and review our podcast, Hanging Out with Nolan Hong, on iTunes. The more we get from there, hopefully the more we'll get some traction here, and this can turn into a big thing. So if you like the show, please help us out by doing that. Other than that, you can share this on Facebook and follow us on Facebook. The podcast has its own Facebook page, so go ahead and search for Hanging Out with Nolan Hong Facebook page, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. We've got another great episode lined up for you next week, so tune in to see who's going to be joining me here at the Pop Creative Media Studios. For my co-host, Dr. Emmett Bean, and my super producer extraordinaire, Jamie, I'm Nolan Hong. And where does he get those wonderful toys?